VMware don't really publish a guide. I asked the VMware guy when he was doing his masterclass if he could find me some, because I noticed he had IOPS in his talk, and he said that he didn't really have one. So this is it, this is one. So minimum 4 IOPS per VM. Maximum 50 IOPS per VM. So what I want you guys to do is just bear that in mind as we're going through some of the test results that I got, that this is what you're being advised. I really hope you like graphs. We have a few. So what we're seeing here is Windows post-boot and pre-logo. So basically as quiescent as possible. So nobody's logged on. I've given it a long time to settle down after boot, and this is just a slice of the IOPS that I've got out there. So red is write, blue is read, and as you can see we've got the scale up to 70 at the side there, so we've got a read peak of 65 and a couple of smaller write peaks. The averages are quite low, so the averages are around 1 IOPS, but really it's supposed to be doing nothing at all. There is a peak there, and really if you're going to do VDI, that kind of peak is bad, because any peak will affect the other VMs on that shared infrastructure. So I'd quite like to know what's happening there. So what we'll have a look at is how we can test exactly what's happening there, because we want to smooth out those peaks as much as possible. So we've got a couple of tools that I'm going to tell you about how to investigate exactly what's happening. First one is in the new Task Manager. You've got access to the Resource Monitor button. A Resource Monitor button will give you a disk tab. It will show you the queue length on the right hand side, and under disk activity it will show you the processes which are consuming IOPS on the left, and it will show you IOPS as throughput. So can you convert throughput to IOPS? Well, you can with the disk manufacturers, as I said before. With Windows it's slightly different. Now most of Windows is 4K blocks. The reason for that is because memory pages are 4K blocks. So data is read into and out of memory in 4K blocks. It's not true for everything though, because especially on sequential writes, what Windows tries to do is tries to aggregate that block size into anything up to a meg. And so what will happen is you get 90% of I/O traffic is 4K, and then 10% of it is between 4K and 1 meg. So because you've got those big meg peaks, it's actually very, very unreliable in Windows to estimate IOPS by dividing your throughput by 4K. So unfortunately that actually isn't very good for us, because that could be a very efficient process. That could be 1.5 IOPS write, or it could be, well, whatever that is divided by 4K. So there's a much better way, and that is, I've heard almost everybody in every session has named a sysinternals tool this weekend. It's kind of cool. So this is Process Monitor, which has a file summary view. And the file summary view is of your filtered events. So if you manage to catch a peak, and you catch the time of that peak, and you have a process monitor chain track, you can filter down to the time that it happened, open up your file summary, and you'll see all the processes and all the IOPS that they use. So that was a peak, and that was actually a remote desktop tool I was using that gave me a large peak over time. You know the one.
Yeah.
So also the advantage of Process Monitor is that it can be started before logon, so you can catch traces right from boot and right through the logon process. So this is back to the graph that we saw before, and we're just seeing how you can investigate these random peaks in your IOPS demand. But like I said, so this is post-boot, pre-logon. So I think we should probably go back to the beginning, so that I missed out. We'll have a look at the boot, shall we? So this tiny bit of colour on the screen there is the graph we were looking at before. If you can't see it, that scale up there goes to 6,000. So what we have is an IOPS peak at 5,250 for boot. So if you're operating on 4 IOPS per desktop, that's probably not enough. So you've got to bear in mind that those Citrix advices for steady state. So that advice is post boot. So what you've got is the boot always has those 2 peaks at the beginning. The login box will appear there. So that will give you a 12-second boot. So that's what you see when you add an SSD into your laptop, which will give you about 5,000 IOPS, and it will take about 5,000 IOPS, and that will give you that 12-second boot. Now, Windows isn't being frivolous with IOPS just because I've given it a lot. Yeah, all of those disk reads and writes need to happen. Yeah, and if you limit the ceiling, then all that will happen is it will take longer. As you can see, if you have a normal drive in your laptop and you boot it, and it will take 90 seconds to boot up to your login screen. Interestingly, that always happens as well. So that's slightly lower, jagged peak. What that is scheduled tasks and agents starting. And you can actually log on first, but that little hump there will always happen either at the same time. So we know the peak, and we know that Windows isn't frivolous with IOPS, so actually the useful number is the area underneath the graph, because that will give you your total IOPS. So the total IOPS for the initial 2 large peaks, the read IOPS is 10,000. The agent or the scheduled task start is again around 10,000. So if I add in the extra write and divide by, let's say, an average of 20 IOPS, we get 1,200 seconds. Yeah, 1,200 seconds is what? 20 minutes. So if you boot a series of desktops and you know you've only allowed 20 hours per desktop, if the system performs at maximum efficiency, you know you're going to get a 20-minute boot time. Obviously it's not, it's going to be longer. So why I took up boots in 20 hours? Well, who cares? Because everybody pre-boots, right? You pre-boot all your VMs overnight. You take account of this, that's what you can handle that peak. Well, apart from the fact, if you start giving Windows above a 5 to 7 minute boot time, it starts to fail. And you'll get some instances of Windows that will fail to boot, and then you have to go back and remediate that situation because it's basically crashed on boot. So you need to be able to pre-boot, work this out, then pre-boot in batches, so you don't have a boot time that is too long. So maybe try and keep it to less than 5 minutes. I actually walked into a customer who had terrible VDI performance because of their IOPS issue. So I asked them how long their pre-boot took. I said, oh, don't worry about that. We don't have any problem with boot. Really? You sure? Yeah, we don't have any problem with boot at all. We never reboot our machines. And basically they did that because they didn't have enough time overnight to account for this demand for IOPS, so they couldn't pre-boot. Other occasions where pre-boot is impossible is when you've got follow the sun on your VDI infrastructure, or if you have to reboot your machines during the day. Now, if you've got to reboot machines during the day, if you've got an emergency patch, if you've got emergency updates to your AV, or even if you're on status and everybody logs off at the same time for lunch, and your machines will shut down and then try and preview. So this means is that what you have to be able to tell your CIO is that if an emergency happens and we need to reboot machines for any reason, you need to tell them that the SLA includes enough time for these to get done. And if it's 4 hours and it's lunchtime, you better tell them you're only getting your environment back tomorrow. So everybody used to say, "Oh, reboot, it'll be back in a minute." And I said, "Oh, this really cool VDI environment I've got, I rebooted it, and yes, it won't come back till tomorrow." It's probably not the best thing that you should be telling your CIO or CTO without forewarning them and making sure that they know the SLA. So either give it more IOPS, or make sure that you document this and you make it clear to everybody. So back to the boot graph. So we saw post-boot, that tiny smidge in there, and we'll have a look at logon. This is the part of the presentation which is the graph is the least useful, because this is with a local profile and the minimum possible stuff in the OS. It's just got Office and an AV agent installed. So this is what you would call your minimum peak for logon. Your maximum can be anything. If you've got AV updates and you have lots of downloads of the BIOS definitions, if you have other things in your startup script, if you have a logon script, all these kind of things can really, really hurt your logon IOPS. You can ameliorate your boot storms, but you can't ameliorate your logon storms. You have to have enough IOPS to cope with this. I just noticed the time, I'm going to hurry up a little bit. Office launch. Again, we're seeing peaks up into the 400s. Now, again, this will happen just after logon. People open Outlook and Word and Excel, which is exactly what this is. So, steady state. The blue peaks and read at the beginning are application launches. The red peak is a HD video. And this portion here is what that initial Citrix device is pointing to. This is what they call steady state. Yeah? And when you hear that VDI is mostly right, yeah, 70 to 80% right, then this is the part that they're talking about. So this is after all the applications have launched, after you've booted up, after you've logged on. Now everything is now in memory, so there is much less IOPS going on. And what's happening is that the runtime information of the applications and the user data is getting written. So, as fine as they are as the steady state numbers, and look, you know, that's 100 there. So 50 IOPS, yeah, you're probably going to be alright with 50 IOPS for steady state. But you better not have one person or two people or 10 people rebooting in the middle of the day. You better not have anything unexpected happen. You have to have that ceiling, or you've got to be prepared for one individual who can do something really stupid, like log on. And you've given yourself a big problem. Let's just take a moment to look at that scale, shall we? So that is 8,000 IOPS at the top. So this is one complete antivirus scan binary of Avira. As you can see, it's quite harsh. So again, one of those stupid things to do is scan for viruses. Definitely won't want anybody doing that. But if this happens with a shared storage infrastructure, you know, your help desk guy goes, "Oh, it must be a virus, let me just scan for it." So again, area underneath the graph is what matters.